This podcast is made possible in part by Patreon support, and I'd like to say thank you to our newest patron, Ben S. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for that wonderful message you sent us. We really do appreciate the kind words. So Ben joined at the $3 a month plus alpha tier. If you want to be as amazing as Ben and all the other wonderful patrons, you can head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon. Sign up for as little as $1 a month. You get early access to episodes and occasional bonus content here and there. So if you just want to make sure that we can keep doing this, and you know, I really would love to hire an editor, somebody to help me out, because I'm really swamped with other stuff. If you want to help make that possible, then hey, come over to japankyo.com/Patreon, sign up. We would really appreciate it. Let's get to the show.
And then they shipped me to Japan.
In a box?
I got placed in a box. It was a fairly large box. I was okay.
I think that's pretty standard procedure.
Yeah.
Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony.
And I'm Ryan.
And, Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask a question about Japan. Today's question is, what's eikaiwa Eikaiwa versus jet?
I forgot you had the da-don button.
Yeah, I got that fancy da-don. Real time fancy mixer. So
his fancy mixer is actually about like a drum. It's just sitting next to him.
Yeah. It's on my desk. I just go da-dum. One of the most common ways that people get to Japan is via teaching English, and the two options pretty much are either Eikaiwa, often translated to like English conversation schools, and the JET program, which is, there's three types of JETs. The most common is the assistant language teacher, where you help a Japanese teacher, in teaching English and doing all that. Then there's the CIR, where you do a lot of translation work and different stuff. And then there's the like unicorn, like sports people, advisor people, which I've never met one, but apparently they exist.
There's the unicorn program.
Yeah, there's the unicorn program.
No explanation.
Yeah. Just when you arrive in Japan, they stick a horn on your forehead, and then just set you free.
Yeah, you just wander around and graze.
Yeah. I've done JET. I think, Ryan, you're finishing up your time with JET. Is that accurate?
Because of Corona, they let me extend, so I'm about like 3 months into my 6th year.
Yeah.
Which will probably be the last year, because for some reason it has a time limit on it.
Yeah. So, Corona has totally messed up everything, the whole schedule. And yeah, but I mean, eventually Japan will let people in a bit more freely. And then, I think things will more or less get back to the more typical hiring schedule. But yeah, the other option is, of course, the Eikaiwa schools, which, Ryan, you also have experience in, right?
Yes, I worked one for about 2 years.
Yeah, so that was the first time around that was it the first time you went to Japan? Was that for
Yeah, that was my first path into Japan way back in 2008, I guess it was.
Okay. Yeah, so I have not taught at an Eikaiwa. I did a little bit of private tutoring in Spanish, but that was totally like a one-on-one thing. Nothing through any sort of job recruitment English thing.
You found people studying Spanish in Japan? There's only 4.
Yeah, well, I found one, or he found me, and he said, "Hey, you speak Spanish? Can I pay you?" I was like, "Yes, please pay me." And
and there wasn't any teaching going on. He just started paying you.
He was. Oh man, he's such a nice guy. So he'd pay for food, and then I would teach him. But I wouldn't just get the money. He'd also stop and pay for food. So it was a pretty nice weekly 5,000 yen plus food and drinks. Yeah, so that was a pretty cushy little thing that I managed to just get out of no effort of my own. He was just looking for somebody to teach him Spanish, and he was pretty good. He was retiring, and he was pretty serious about it, and he's kept up with it, and he's gotten pretty good, I think. So anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but that stuff does happen. It does happen, not just with Spanish, but English too. So we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the differences in Eikaiwa and Jet, and especially since Ryan has done both, I thought he'd be a good person to ask because I have not done both. So, Ryan, where do you want to start? You want to tell us a little bit what's a typical what was the Eikaiwa like process like getting in, and what did you do? What was a typical day like?
Getting in, like, so starting from the application?
Yeah. Was it like, I guess, was it easier than Jet? Like, was it pretty similar? Like, how was it?
I think it was pretty similar,
Mhm.
honestly. I had to like apply online and then I got an interview. Luckily, I lived in Southern California at the time because I think the interview was in Los Angeles. Nowadays, I'd like to say they're probably doing it online, but because it's Japan based, they're probably not doing it online.
Yeah, you never know with Japan. Yeah.
The interview was probably more, I don't know, professional than Jet. Jet wasn't like a bad interview, but Jet was just a lot of like asking you questions about yourself and like what your interest in Japan was. The Eikaiwa one actually wanted me to like teach model lessons and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a bit more teaching focused and asking questions about experience. I mean, it is like a for-profit business, so I guess they're
Sure.
hoping for. I think they hire more people because the demand's higher. Because the image they have is that like people who don't get into Jet try the Eikaiwa. So people I think they have lower standards,
Hmm.
but this businesses themselves don't have that attitude. They're not like, oh yeah, we're not as good as them, but want to work for us.
Hmm.
They're not like that. But yeah, then I had to go to like a training thing. The one I worked at went out of business now, so they don't exist anymore.
Hmm.
But their North American headquarters was in Canada, so actually they had to go to Canada for a training thing for a week.
Oh wow, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, and then they shipped me to Japan,
In a
and I
box.
got placed in yeah in a box. It was
Okay.
a fairly large
I,
box. I was
I think
okay.
that's pretty standard procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits I think they do have for people who don't want to live in the countryside is they tend not to have a whole bunch of schools in the middle of nowhere. It's mostly like more urban or suburban areas.
Hmm.
So I was sent to Sakai City, which is like right next to Osaka, and it's basically equally big and developed.
Hmm.
Whereas I had friends on Jet. I had the most extreme example I know is that there was one person in my Jet training who was his school was on a tiny island, but they didn't want to house him there because there was like literally nothing there. I think the whole place only had like a population of 100. So every morning he had to take like a ferry to work and then a ferry home, and there was literally two ferries per day, one in the morning and one at night.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that.
Yeah, so I mean, some people are really into that. I've heard that's
Yeah.
better if you actually want to like experience Japanese-ness and learn
Yeah.
Japanese because you're kind of like on your own. I
Yeah, I would
was,
agree, but it can also be kind of stressful if if it's a bit too much for you.
yeah, I personally like comfortable living more than
Yeah.
that. So yeah, the location I was at was pretty nice.
Hmm.
Uh, I worked. Their working hours, I think, tend to be later than Jet. Jet is like normal working hours. Like my current hours, working hours, I get there like 8:15. I think my day ends at 4:15.
Right. Yeah, it was pretty much the same for me. Yeah.
Yeah, get there in the morning, stay throughout the day, leave a little bit before 5. The Eikaiwa ones, because most people work during the working time and can't go to the Eikaiwa classes, tend to be a little bit later. So I think my day started 12 or 12:30 and ran through about 9 p.m.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, like post work. Yeah.
And we had Saturday as a work day, but we had every Sunday and Monday off.
Hmm.
At my school, okay, so Japan is set up so that most holidays are on Mondays.
Hmm.
And my school did not compensate us if it was a Monday holiday by giving us like a Tuesday off. We just didn't get those holidays then.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess kind of brings me to my overall opinion of it is I think that the literal in the classroom teaching at Eikaiwa may be more fun than I don't know if it's more fun than the Jet. So Jet is like a normal classroom. You have like usually 40 or more students and you teach everybody. And there's parts of that that is fun, but it's hard to make a direct connection with any student because it's so big and because they have you like switching to so many different classes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in my current school, I see all of the first year students once a week. half of the second year students once a week, and then like one class among the third years twice a week.
Yeah.
So the third years are the only ones that I see more than once a week. So they're the only ones that have any hope of like learning their names or anything. I
Right.
did
And then,
once work at a. Sorry.
no, no. And then what's worse is sometimes like during test periods or certain times of the year, like you get a bunch of classes that you get skipped, right? Like you don't even get to see them.
Yeah, yeah. For whatever reason, they value. They don't say this, but the way
Mhm.
they approach education seems to value the ALT's lessons the least of all.
Yeah.
So usually 2, possibly 3 weeks before test, you just don't have lessons because the other teachers want to like catch up with any gaps or things they didn't have time to do.
Yeah. 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 It's very
So you end
common.
up, yeah. I think, yeah. I guess I'll say it now before because I'll forget later. I think the approach with the JET system is problematic
Hmm.
because they highly prioritize the classes where I think they're learning completely useless things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well,
then don't
they're
put.
learning how to take the test, basically, right?
Yeah, the tests. I don't even know if it's on the tests.
Hmm.
Okay, so this summer, one of our classes had a translation class, and they said like, "Oh, Ryan, you have nothing this summer. You want to come help?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And the stuff they were translating, it's like really awkward, clunky Japanese into really awkward, clunky English. And the book is like, "Oh, here's how you say this grammar form," and stuff that like you will never see in your life.
Hmm.
I feel like all of their grammar was designed in like the 1920s, and they've never updated it. Like, I would say that's an exaggeration, but I don't think it is.
I no, you know what? I was reading an article today just because we're going to be talking about this, and it was a little bit about the history of like English education in Japan. And I forgot the name of some guy, but some guy was criticizing like English education, even like around that time period, like Meiji-ish, I think, that it was like so much like rote memorization and that kind of like just learning stuff that is not actually useful. So even like back then,
Yeah,
there were people criticizing that way of doing it.
like I think they have been putting effort into changing the whole just like here's flashcards or a book with a list of things, memorize it. Though they still do that.
Yeah.
The main issue for me is just the stuff they're learning they will literally never use.
Yeah, yeah.
It's stuff that if you hear it, it's like, well, that's technically grammatical, but you'll never encounter it outside of some like newspaper from 1930. Like it's
Right.
so old fashioned. And yet very frequent like everyday usage stuff they have no clue about at all because it's not in any of their books.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I guess that's kind of that's the biggest downside with Jet.
Hmm.
Jet pays more. I think the general contract conditions are better, and it's nice to have like be like a real teacher. You get like a little bit more respect, I guess, than the uh, Eikaiwa stuff.
Hmm.
The downside is a lot of the time I feel like my job's just kind of wasting time because what we're teaching
Yeah.
them, even if they memorize it perfectly, it will never help them in any form in their life. And I try
Yeah.
to make my lessons not like that, so that my lessons are things that they actually can learn. But sometimes you get like friction from the other teachers because they want you to teach the textbook stuff, and the textbooks are terrible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or you have things like I had with the translation experience that like even if I'm trying to make all of my lessons actually useful, my lessons are such a low priority in every other teacher's mind, and the stuff that they're spending their time on is such a waste of time that it just has this kind of frustrating hopelessness feel as a teacher sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there. I felt that, and I think tons of people have felt that. Um.
Especially when you see students like actually studying really hard and trying, but the
Hmm.
stuff they're being taught is just nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very frustrating. I mean, if you're gonna take the time to have them learn that, then why not actually have them learn something useful, right?
Yeah.
But
Like if they in a theoretical world just completely perfectly memorized everything taught to them and then like moved abroad, they would talk like a weird awkward robot man. Like when
yeah.
people make jokes about like Mark Zuckerberg being a human or whatever, like that's how they would actually talk. Like, "Hello peers, do you prefer to," like I can't even think of how
Yeah.
awkward. Like as a native it's actually difficult to produce that stuff because it's just so weird.
Yeah. 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 No, I know what you mean.
Frequently, they'll like hand me a writing with no context and be like, "Oh, correct this," and I'll just like underline something that I think is super awkward. I put like a question mark above it, and
uh-huh.
then like, "Oh, that's the grammar we're teaching them today," and they'll show me the textbook, and they pretty much wrote exactly word for word what the textbook had, and the
Yeah.
textbook itself is just horribly awkward and weird.
What I mean, but I've been through that sort of thing too. And what's kind of weird is the fact that these Japanese teachers don't. I'm like teachers that are of Japanese origin, right? The ones that are
Yeah,
teaching the English, that they many, not all, you do get some good English speakers every now and then, but many don't realize or don't seem to realize that what they are teaching is like at best confusing, if not just outright like strange.
yeah.
So yeah, that is very strange, and unfortunately, that is a reality of it. Um, so like, what about like in Eikaiwa? Like, is it a structured program? Like, do you have a textbook? Like, what's the
There
approach to
was
teaching?
there's a lot of different options. The most basic class did have a textbook and was structured, and it would usually be like a 1 or 2 page lesson when they come in. And it's
Mm-hmm.
Eikaiwa, so it's very heavily focused on speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I think their curriculum was drastically better.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, whenever I have a student who is actually good at English, I just assume they're doing Eikaiwa outside of their class time at high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so far that has always been the case. Except for maybe once there was a kid who like lived in Georgia for like 4 years or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like anytime there's a student I have that's good, it's because they're in Eikaiwa in addition. So I do think the curriculum is much, much better. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, the lessons, they can be more fun. Like I said, it's hard to really say which one's more fun because sometimes having the big classroom is fun,
Yeah.
but sometimes having like a small classroom with 4 students is fun because you can get to know them better and like customize things towards them. And generally, the stuff is like real English that people will actually use. The
Mm-hmm.
downside to the Eikaiwa is pretty much everything else related to them. Their contracts seem to be much, much worse, and the pay tends to be much, much less.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I did it, like almost 15 years ago, the contracts were like not bad.
Mm-hmm.
The pay was only a little bit less than Jet, and we had like a lot of freedom. My contract explicitly stated if we did not have a lesson, we were completely free time, didn't even have to stay at school. And in the early morning, you tend to have a lot of like housewife or retired people come in, and
Mm-hmm.
then in the evening, you tend to have like students after school or businessmen after work,
Mm-hmm.
which means usually from like early to mid afternoon, usually there's just nobody. So
Mm-hmm.
occasionally I would have a day where there's like 2 lessons in the morning, 2 lessons at night, and then like 5 hours in the middle that were free. And I literally once just like went to a movie theater and watched a movie, and then like they didn't complain at all. They're like, "Yeah, that's fine. No one's coming in."
Uh-huh.
I
That's
have heard
fun.
like as I mentioned, my company went out of business, and the
Yeah.
people who remained are I've heard, I haven't worked with them, but I have friends who have, that they're much more controlling and much more stingy.
Uh-huh.
I think the pay got even lower and their demands got even higher. And I've heard from friends they're just not very fun. Like again, the lessons can be fun, the students can be great, but the conditions are usually not so good.
Yeah, I've heard other people say similar things. Yeah,
They
like
want you there like all the time. They pay you very
right,
little. During
right.
Corona, actually, I wasn't there, but I heard from a friend that they were trying, for whatever reason, they just hated the idea of working from home. So they forced every teacher to come to the office, but then remotely teach from the office. So they were just using like Zoom in their office.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard similar stories of like other companies doing that in Japan. It's like
Yeah.
you defeat the whole point of remote work. Like what? um, so I know like around that time, I think it was like 2007. Was when Nova, which was like the biggest one, I think that went out of business. And in 2010, GEOS went out of business.
Yeah, that was the one I was at. But
GEOS,
then
okay.
the company that acquired Nova, because you still see schools with the Nova branding.
Yeah, but they got
Uh,
bought out.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I that company also bought Geos. At the time, their name was like G Education, but I remember doing like resumes. I like looked it up, and they've changed their name again. I think I don't know what they are now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All I believe all the Geoses are gone. They all got rebranded as Novas.
Oh, okay.
but you can still see novas, and they're pretty major among Eikaiwa, but they're not the same nova as the 20 years ago nova that had like the very bad reputation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I was reading a little bit about that today. Basically, there was a whole bunch of, especially when things started going down, like, people weren't getting paid. They didn't know if they were still
Yeah.
technically employed or not. They were like getting kicked out of apartments, and there was a whole big thing in right around 2007, 2008.
Honestly, GEOS was kind of a similar situation.
Oh, really? Huh.
I did. I mean, they had. Okay, so the first thing I would say that I think is funny is that they actually wanted to keep. So the current Nova is not the 20-year-old Nova. Just
Yeah.
to be very clear, so we don't get sued.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
But they wanted to keep the name for the name recognition in Japan, which I think is a little surprising because Nova
Given
had
how
such an
badly
extremely
it
bad
went down,
reputation. I guess that wasn't famous among Japanese English
That's
learners.
true.
It was only
That's
famous
true.
among
Yeah.
the teachers and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, they suddenly went out of business with like no warning to any of the staff. So people found themselves jobless, and you're paid monthly, and I believe they just didn't pay the last month, but they made them work the last month.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened at GEOS actually. Like I remember I think it was April like 21st or something is when we went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire month of April we had already worked 3 weeks, and they're just like, well, sorry, no pay, we're out of business.
Oh, so you were actually there when it happened?
Yes.
Damn, I didn't know that. Okay.
I showed up at the door and there was a reporter there asking to talk with me, and I was like, huh, what's going on? And my manager's like, don't talk to him, come inside.
Wow. Oh, geez. Oh,
yeah, and then we had like an online thing where they told us all the schools had closed, but it was really bad because they knew they were going out of business but didn't tell anyone just so they wouldn't have to pay us.
Yeah.
And then the new we had this whole big meeting, and then like they found out that we were being bought out by someone else and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. So
I forgot what I was going to say with the Nova stuff, but oh yeah. So when Nova happened, a lot of the people's apartments were like in their company's name because.
Oh yeah.
It sounds bad, but there's a problem in Japan of landlords not renting to foreigners, so that was a way to like get around that because they were renting to the company.
Mm-hmm.
But the downside of that is that a lot of people ended up losing their housing or having problems. So they passed laws now that I think they can't do that. So in my era, like if your company disappears, you can't just suddenly become homeless.
That's good.
Because my apartment was set up in my company's name, I think. So, but they told me like, don't worry, there's now protections. You have like 2 or 3 months to like figure stuff out before anything can happen. And I immediately switched to my own like private apartment.
Yeah.
And then I kept working at the new company that had bought GEOS for about 2 or 3 months. I had bad experiences with them too, though. So they never fired me or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is kind of a funny story. I basically kept my job because I just showed up, even though they told me to stay home.
Like old people here, but Seinfeld, like George Costanza just showing up. I guess is technically still employed.
Pretty much. So they told everyone that don't worry, your jobs won't be gone, but like here's a list of schools that are closing, and it was like most of the schools. Uh-huh. And they said if your school's closing, stay home. Like we'll contact you again, and like we'll find a new school for you because we'd rather keep you than like hire new people. So don't worry about it, but it might take some time. Uh-huh. I believe none of them ever got a call back and had a job after that.
Wow.
Like I didn't keep in touch with absolutely everyone, but I literally never heard of anyone being offered a new position after that. Though I'm not positive. Like I said, I didn't.
Sure.
Yeah. Most people just figured it was hopeless and looked for a new job. I worked at 2 schools. 4 days a week I worked at my school in Sakai. 1 day a week I worked in this place called Migaoka. Not famous or not important, just a place in Osaka. Mm-hmm. My main school closed, but my once a week school did not close. Mm-hmm. So I just went to the once a week school every day. And the management handled this very poorly, but the local like in-staff manager people, they were like really friendly and liked me. So when I showed up, they're like, yeah, Ryan, keep coming here. We're going to tell them you work here. We'll find something for you to do.
This is so weird.
Well, yeah, they were trying to help me keep my job because they were friendly and nice.
But this is like a company not knowing like what the heck is going on. It's like, no, we want you to stay.
Oh, yeah. The managers were just in the dark as the teachers. Like none of us had been told anything.
Oh my God.
So yeah, my manager there at the time was like one of my best friends in Osaka, and she was like, the first day I was literally just like helping them make signs and pamphlets because they were trying to explain to people we're not closed, don't worry. Spoilers, that school also closed down like 2 months later.
Wow.
But yeah, I didn't even have I still had like, I think it was Wednesday with it. I still had my Wednesday lessons, but
Uh-huh.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or I guess it wasn't Monday, it would be Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I was just like helping the manager make flyers and handouts and like greeting people as they came in.
Huh.
They did rearrange lessons to like lighten the burden of the other teachers there and give me some stuff, so I at least would have like a lesson a day.
Yeah.
Because one of them I think was also quitting soon, like regardless of, or not related to the company closing. Like her contract was just ending in like 3 months, and she was leaving anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
they kind of like eased her stuff over to me, and then she just had some free time at the end. But yeah, so as I was working there, they had needed help in another school that was like more in the countryside of Kawachi Nagano in Osaka. So I started
Mhm.
going there, I think originally once a week, but then twice a week. But then the school that had saved me from being my once a week school, they went out of business. So then I started going to the countryside school every single day.
This is like whack-a-mole.
I actually had work there though, because
Okay.
they had a Japanese teacher and a foreign teacher, and I believe both quit. So I just took over like both of their lessons.
Jeez, this is hilarious.
I should also point out I was in a unique situation because I could speak some Japanese. Not as
Uh-huh.
good as now, but I was like probably just a little below N2 because I passed N2 like right after all this happened.
Yeah.
I had a lot more trust and freedom than some of my coworker friends who couldn't do any Japanese.
Hmm.
So at all the schools I worked at, I think, except for the Izumigaoka, I actually had keys to the building, and they
Wow.
trusted me to like open up and close at night because they knew business was bad, so they were trying to like keep the staff to a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like my first school, the main school, we didn't even have a manager for the last several months. It was just me and a Japanese teacher, and we tried to handle everything. If someone wanted to come in and do paperwork, I would just explain to them like, "Oh, let me call the office, and we'll have someone come here to help you because I'm alone and I'm teaching."
Hmm.
But yeah, that the final school also, we did have a manager, but I think I was at the very end. I think I was the only teacher. There was like two when I first got there, but I think they both left.
You're like
And
the last man standing.
pretty much. And then that school lasted like throughout the summer. And I remember they called me saying that they were gonna like find some place to send me. They wanted to send me to Gifu.
Uh-huh.
And when they called me, this was like my most bad experience with them because they called me a lot to like set things up and like arrange things. I told them like I didn't really want to work in like a super isolated mountain village, and Gifu is kind of isolated and
Yeah.
mountainous.
Yeah, it's known for mountains. Yeah. There actually
Yeah,
Gifu isn't
and
known for much aside from mountains, I think.
yeah,
No
and
insult to Gifu, but yeah.
the person who worked there, the like was not Japanese. It was a Westerner who was working in the office. Just because I'm going to say
Uh-huh.
bad things about her because she was a liar.
Hmm. Uh-huh.
She got angry at me too because I called her a liar at the end because she was a liar. She assured me I would not go to some little nowhere mountain town and that I would be working in Gifu City, which is a small city, but it is a city.
Hmm.
And then like, okay, that'll be fine. I'm not excited about it, but whatever. I get to keep my job. And then a month later, I get an email like, "Hi, Ryan Sensei. We heard you're coming to our school in I don't remember the name of the town."
Hmm.
And I looked it up on Google, and it's a tiny mountain village with like a population of like 600.
Uh-huh.
And so I emailed her and was like, "You told me I would be in Gifu City and that I would not have to go to some tiny town, but these people think I'm going there." And like, "Oh, they shouldn't have contacted you yet." But I never said you were going to Gifu City. And like, "Yes, you did."
Oh, jeez.
So then I quit there.
Uh-huh.
I got very lucky because a friend of mine, the company he worked to, which is something similar to Jet but run by a private company, one
Hmm.
of the teachers they had hired had like a family emergency and backed out like a week before lessons started, so they had like an opening.
Oh, wow.
And I managed to get that opening. And then, like I said, it wasn't Jet, but it was basically the exact same thing as Jet, but working for a private company. But it was in
Sure.
like public. They focus on junior high schools,
Hmm.
and yeah, I just did exactly the same work as Jet. One thing that was nice about that job is one of the schools had the, I think, extremely good idea of rather than trying to spread the ALT around super thinly so you see every class once a week, I
Hmm.
taught every first year class every day, and I just never saw the second or third years.
Okay. Okay. I mean, at least there's a logic to that. I get that.
Yeah, the downside is I didn't get to see the others like at all.
Yeah,
The plus
yeah.
side is I actually knew every student. Like I knew them by name and by face. I saw them
Hmm.
every day. And because I was seeing them every day, Jet sometimes has the bad habit that they want the ALT to be like it's not for credit, it's not on the test. Let's just have fun with English, which does have value. I
Yeah,
think
yeah. You're the cultural ambassador or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
getting the students to not hate English does have a lot of long-term value.
Yes, it does. Yes.
But I was in the normal lessons. So rather than like, here's Ryan's once a week, let's play funny games lesson, it was like, we're just doing normal grammar lessons and conversation writing lessons. But the lessons were genuinely co taught because they never are.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that was like the only environment I ever had where we actually did co teaching, where we would work on the lesson plan together and teach together. Like I would do the first 5 minutes, you would do that, you kind of like trade off who's at the front talking, or like whenever we were exampling stuff, we'd actually like bounce off of each other.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
every other environment I've had, co-teaching means one person teaches, one person sits at the back and watches, and like
Yep.
helps students with writing and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was
Hmm.
actually really good. But that's not Eikaiwa anymore. So yeah.
Right. 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 Yeah.
To
Yeah.
do the rough summary, I think as a job, Jet is more secure and has better conditions. And the lessons are fun.
Hmm.
Like I'm not against them, but it does have the especially over a long time when I'm in my sixth year, the like I want to help these students, but I believe the system I'm working in cannot help them.
Yep.
Eikaiwa, they learn real stuff and they get much better than the people who only do like jet lessons or like public high school lessons. But the contracts tend to be not so good. The job security is way lower. I don't think they've had any like gigantic bankruptcies since GEOS. I mean,
No,
there's probably been some
no. I
small
think
like
GEOS
local
was the
ones here.
last one, and yeah, no, I haven't heard anything like exorbitantly like horrible or anything like that.
Yeah, the main thing I hear from my friends now is just the pay is low and they want you to work lots and lots and lots of hours.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes down to I mean, if you really want to boil it down, I guess it comes down to one is a profit, one is a nonprofit, right? Like
Yeah.
so, the Eikaiwa, it makes sense that they're focusing on the stuff that will actually render results, right? They want you to talk
Yeah.
to the kids or to the students, and that will make the person feel like they are making progress because they actually are making progress. They're making real world progress. At the same time, though, they're trying to like pinch every penny so that they can actually make money,
Yeah.
right?
I do remember the one thing I really hated is they want you to be their salesman, so they have all these dumb books they want you to like
Oh,
push on them.
I've heard about that. Yeah. Like
Some
you
of
have
the
like a
books like
quota kind of thing,
yeah,
right?
I really hated that. Some of the books I think could actually be useful for people. Where I worked, we had I guess there was like a large number of wealthy people because we actually had a huge amount of private lessons, and private lessons is just we do whatever they want. Sometimes they want to study for like TOEIC tests. Sometimes they just want to talk and they don't want to book at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you just get like some dude in his 60s who's like retired and is like, I just want to have a conversation partner. Today for
Yeah,
breakfast,
yeah.
I had this. And those are fun. My favorite was actually a retired surgeon who wanted to read an English novel before he died. So
Oh, that's a that's a cool goal.
his English was stupidly good. Like he could easily do this on his own. So of course he picked Gulliver's Travels because like if it was Stephen King, he could do it in a weekend by himself. So he
Yeah.
picked a 300-year-old book with a whole bunch of really old phrases that he actually needed help with. And we did
Yeah.
it. We finished it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then we moved on to Swiss Family Robinson. He only wanted to read like really old stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do think because his English level was very, very high. And if it was any like modern novel, he wouldn't have any issue with it at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had another student who took 2 hours of private lessons. He was always my last class on Saturday, so I liked him. His level was also very, very high, and we would do 1 hour pretty much just freely talking. But he loved movies and was like just interested in world stuff and like politics, so we'd have like really deep conversations. And then the second half, he had like a writing. I guess it's like a reading based book. It would be really long writings, like 5 page long, like essays or yeah, I guess just essays that would be about kind of like abstract ideas and then discuss it. That one was really fun.
Wow.
Yeah, those lessons were fun for me because Japan's English level overall is very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
I always meet people who have this idea like, oh, I can get by in Japan because everyone speaks English. I think because they hear they take English from like elementary school,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but don't expect that if you come to Japan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people can understand maybe a few words here or there, but the thing is, like, they're not used to native pronunciation for the
Not
most
at
part
all.
too, so that throws them off completely.
Not, I don't, like, how many, I'm trying to use the Japanese word to say non-demo, or
Mhm.
non-kaidemo. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how many times it's happened, but I've had people ask me to repeat an English word in katakana pronunciation because they can't understand it in the English.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's the sad
And
reality.
it's
Yeah,
like, no, I'm not going to do that. This is the real pronunciation.
yeah. I mean, well, if you look in the textbooks, it's like they've got the furigana, the little katakana
Yeah.
on top of the English, and you're like, what the hell? Like,
Okay, that's a good example of the problem with the current like public system.
yeah,
They're taught katakana English, which means they don't learn like Thursday. They learn Sazday.
yeah,
And that is the only pronunciation they ever use. To the
yeah.
extent that if you pronounce it the correct way, they don't understand it and they just stare
Yeah,
at you
and a
confused.
lot of times they panic. They go, what kind of, oh, what is this?
And the thing that really bothers me is even teachers who have great pronunciation, I've had a handful who've lived abroad and have like native level pronunciation.
Yeah,
When they're teaching, they often won't say Thursday, they'll say Sazday.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And
I
I
know.
always like look at them angrily, like, don't do that. You're just prolonging this horrible problem. And they're like, oh, but they don't understand otherwise. Like, yeah, because no one ever uses the real pronunciation.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, all right, guys, we're gonna have the Japanese class, so practice with me. Konnichiwa, hajime mashite, watashi. That's how we pronounce it, all
Yeah.
right, guys? Like,
Yeah, it's exactly like
no,
that.
that's not what you do.
And it's so hard because we just had a speech contest, and sometimes they want me to help them with pronunciation. And it's like I'll help them as much as I can, but like in my head, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't undo the 8 years of bad pronunciation you've been taught. So good
Yeah.
luck. I hope the
And
other
even if
people
I
also are
do
bad.
something, yeah, even if I do something now, you're just gonna like basically correct them into speaking the way that I was telling them not to.
That also happens. That's also frustrating. I have a pronunciation lesson where I try to go over the most obvious. So they think that like R and L is the hardest sound, which they're bad at, but they're not that bad at it really if they practice it. But like F's, or not F, V and TH,
Uh-huh.
I think they're horrible at.
Yeah.
So I had a whole lesson teaching them V. Because for some reason in Japan they teach it as if it's B, and the students think it's B.
Well, it's
So
bui, right?
yeah,
It's
they,
something
they,
like
they call
that.
the letter bui, and the
Yeah.
best way I can explain it is like in English, C and K can both be ka, and it
Mhm.
just is one or the other. That is
Mhm.
exactly how they perceive of B versus V. Like it's the exact same
Yeah.
sound, but just sometimes it's a B and sometimes it's a V. We just have to memorize
Yeah.
it. And like, no, it's not. It's a completely different sound, and it's not even similar to B. Because I try to
Mhm.
teach them it's similar to F because it is.
Mhm.
And so like,
I
okay,
mean,
make an F
the
sound.
position of the mouth is like, yeah,
It's exactly the
it's
same.
yeah.
And luckily they can do F. So like, okay, you guys can do F, right? Okay, now do an S sound versus a Z sound. Do you see how your mouth's in the same place and the difference is just voice? It's the
Mhm.
same thing. Do a F sound plus voice, that's V.
Mhm.
And always the students like have this look of amazement on their face when they can do it, and they can do it, and they're practicing it, and like I give them tongue twisters with V, like
Mhm.
vivacious vowel vacuumed vigorously or something, I don't remember.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they can do it, and they practice it, and like, cool. And then the next week they're back to making a buh sound because that's what
Yeah.
their teacher says.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, like the thing is, when I speak Japanese, I have an accent. Everybody, unless you
Yeah.
you start learning super young, everybody has an accent, and that's totally fine. But the
Yeah.
problem is that there's no effort to show like something closer to what you're actually going to hear from,
It's
a native speaker, right?
it's
And
worse
that,
than that because, like I said, the teachers who have good pronunciation teach bad pronunciation.
yeah, yeah,
It's like they're pushing you into the horrible accent. And
mhm.
honestly, I don't even think it counts as an accent because katakana
Well,
English is not comprehensible to a native speaker.
yeah, yeah, no, that's true.
Like like people like me and you who are very familiar with Japan and have taught in Japan, we learn it as if it's another language so you can recognize it.
Yeah,
But like whenever a family member, like when my parents visit, if they meet my students, they can't understand anything.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's not just an accent, like it's just wrong. Natives
Yeah,
don't understand it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
But
that's again what frustrates me about that system is because some of the students are legitimately working hard, and they're working hard to learn a linguistic thing because it's not English, that
Yeah.
no one can understand outside of Japan.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're learning something English adjacent, but
Yeah,
it's not something they can actually use.
it's a language invented by Japan, solely used and understood in Japan.
Yeah, yeah, and that's extremely frustrating. I mean, like the thing about Jet. I mean, again, I didn't do Eikaiwa, but my general impression is I think you get a lot more variety with Jet in various senses. First of all, like you might be teaching various age ranges. Of course, in Eikaiwa
Yeah,
you might teach adults as well. But aside from that, what I mean is like it all comes down to the school and the teachers that you're working with, because some teachers amazing, they find a
yes.
way to make it work. They tend to be the minority, but they actually have good pronunciation, and they try to, like, at least even if they can only give you one class a week, they try to make that one class a week good for you and for the class. But again, that tends to be the minority. Most people tend to be the more traditional kind of like what we're talking about, and sometimes that's a little bit of just like the system kind of pushing them in that direction, and sometimes that's the people not even realizing what they're doing. So
I will say, since I've been here more recently than you and longer than you, I think it's gotten better. That I now think the majority of the teachers are in the like good trying hard camp. Really, the problem now is just it's still very much focused on they have to pass the test, and pronunciation's not on the test, so they just don't value it at all. For example, that weird awkward translation class, as I mentioned, the Japanese was also weird and awkward, I think because they wanted it to match the target English. So the teacher like openly told them, like, this is weird. So step one is not translate to English. Step one is translate bad Japanese to natural Japanese, then translate that into English. And even if that's different from what the textbook says, if it's like understandable, we'll just like hope it's good. Which it's not ideal, but I think that is better than like let's end up with English no one's used since the 1940s.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean,
and he would offer his own like answers different from the textbook, and universally his were way better than the textbook.
Okay, well that's good. That's good. So at least there's that.
Yeah, and it's not every teacher, but I do think it is at least over the 50% mark where I work now that I think are speaking real language and trying to teach real language. Like I said, it's just the system itself we're working in doesn't value any of the things that are important and puts tons of value on things that don't matter.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I think, and I think many people would agree that there needs to be some kind of like restructuring of the system, because otherwise it's like, what's the point, right? It's like, it's kind of a waste of time. So it's like, are we really like spending all that money like on Jet and English in general? Like, so are the it's like, here's the conspiracy. It's like the Eikaiwa are lobbying so that the Japanese public school
keep education bad so they can stay in business.
Yeah. So otherwise, like, oh no, Eikaiwa's done. Like, business is over, right? So I'm not saying that is a thing, but I'm sure the Eikaiwa business is definitely profiting off of that.
Yeah, because more and more businesses and just places in general are putting a heavy value on English. It was big before the Olympics. Now after the Olympics, I forgot, there's some article I read in the newspaper that was like, more than a college education, English ability is like what you need for the future. And the government keeps trying to step up the English here. They're just doing it in like the worst possible way.
Yeah. I mean, like when I was over there teaching like 2010 to 2013, that's when they started doing the elementary school lessons on Jet and
weirdest
in public
thing.
school.
I kind of want to jump in to interrupt you here just because that's the thing that is the weirdest to me. I only teach high school now, so I don't know where the bad part occurs. But I know one of my best friends is one of the elementary school teachers, and he is shocked when I tell him these stories because he's like, no, they like, I'm their only pronunciation teacher, and they pronounce everything the English way. Like, they can say his name, not a katakana version of his name, but his name. They can say Thursday. They can say very, not Betty. So sometime after elementary school, they learned the bad pronunciation.
Perhaps. I mean, maybe in junior high. I mean, I
do suspect it's when the Japanese English teachers take a more active role, because I think in elementary school it's only the foreign teacher.
Yeah, well, that's how it was for me. I was basically me, and sometimes the homeroom teacher, whatever, their main teacher would jump in and help, but
Yeah,
like I was the one leading the classes.
they're like an assistant. I
Yeah.
think from junior high on, the Japanese teachers become the main teacher, and it becomes like an everyday thing
Yep.
instead of just when they have that teacher. And I
Hmm.
think that is when they are, air quotes, corrected into katakana pronunciation, and then just from then on, everything's bad. And I want to
Yeah.
stress, I don't think it's those teachers' faults. I think it's, again, the curriculum we have, the textbooks we have, and the whole
Yeah.
idea of we have to study this weird archaic stuff because it's on the test, and pronunciation's not on the test, therefore it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Again, even the best Japanese teacher in the world still has to, do certain things according to the system. I mean, even the best English teacher of Japanese origin, you know what I mean. But yeah. So yeah, it's really tricky, and the English classes in elementary school were very fun. No homework, no tests or anything like that. It was just a lot of fun activities in the class. But then
Yeah.
like we're saying, once you get to the junior high, then it becomes super structured, and you have to know what goes in that blank that is on the test, and that's it. So yeah, that's unfortunate, but so. Overall, I mean, you've had a pretty unique experience with the Eikaiwa thing too, but I
Yeah.
mean, and kind of unique now with the whole Corona thing that you ended up staying a bit longer than the original plan was, but
Yeah.
on Jet. But what would you say you prefer Jet over Eikaiwa? Like, do you have a clear preference?
I think there are good points of both. Because, I mean, someone
Sure.
listening could be, like, applying for Eikaiwa, and I don't want to, like, talk you out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, having the higher pay is actually kind of a big deal, so I do think I would pick Jet overall.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty good point in Jet's favor. Yeah.
I had enough at Eikaiwa, but it was just like, I'm surviving and doing this. In Jet, I feel like I actually can make some savings. Honestly,
Mhm.
Jet's pay is still pretty low. It hasn't
Yeah.
risen in like 20 years or something. In fact, they've actually lowered it.
Yeah, the entry got lower, and but the max remained the same, something like that, right?
Yeah, and I think all across the nation, I don't know if it was just here, they removed our housing allowance because the,
Oh,
the
really?
the email they sent us was so badly worded too. It was like,
Oh,
laws have changed and we are no longer required by law to give you housing, so you are not getting housing anymore.
oh,
It was just
wow.
like, really? Like, you can't say like, oh, budgets have changed or oh, our funding's changed. Like, we are no
Yeah,
longer legally obligated to do this, so now we won't.
yeah. So we're not doing it, sucker.
That's really what it came off as.
Yeah,
Because I think
I
our
didn't know
like
that
main
happened.
leader person who does speak English natively had like sent another email like, yeah, it wasn't worded right, but sorry, that's gone now. But yeah, that was basically like 30,000 yen a month less for pretty much everybody.
Yeah. I mean, back when I was there, my rent was pretty darn cheap for living in Kobe, so I was pretty happy with that. But I guess that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, and yeah, they really do need to work on that because like you get a pretty big, like a significant raise like your second year and your third year,
Hmm.
and then your fourth year you get like almost nothing. It's like you get an extra
Hmm.
$10 a year, and then your fifth year you get nothing. It just doesn't change anymore.
Yeah. I mean, well, the goal, I guess, is not to have people stay long term. I guess they want that constant churn for whatever
That's
reason.
another one of the things, honestly, that I think they really need to change.
Hmm.
I am a professional teacher, and I taught before this, I teach now, and I'll teach after this.
Hmm.
There is kind of an issue with getting people who have the attitude of, I'm going to take a 1 year vacation in Japan.
Yeah.
And they put no effort into anything. And I think that's why the teachers rely so little on the ALTs and why they're considered such like an optional bonus thing is there's a large
Yeah.
number of them that have no teaching experience, no interest in teaching, and they'll do a lesson if you give it to them, but they don't really work hard.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's one, I guess, kind of counter argument from the Japanese perspective. It's like, but we don't know who the heck is going to be coming next
Yeah.
year, and we don't know if we can really rely on them. And I think that's a perfectly valid point. There are new people that have never taught before that can be amazing, and
Yes,
then
yes,
there's
yes.
the other opposite, and as well.
And I don't think that's the majority. I do think the
Yeah.
whole interview and screening process, they try to weed out the I just want a
Yeah.
1 year vacation people.
Mhm.
because like I don't want to like out anyone because being here for 6 years now, I've met many new Jets, and I think it's only a small handful who had that attitude, and they all
Yeah,
leave
I
after one
think
year.
it's yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
but I do think that's why like the ALT is seen as not a real teacher, but as like a bonus lesson.
Yeah.
And if they just got rid of the time limit, they because the schools want to keep us, they openly tell us like it's kind of like a lottery what teacher they get, and the average isn't so high. So when they get like an actual teacher who likes teaching, they desperately want to keep you. They're just not allowed to. Like
Hmm.
my principal actually called the board of education, like, can we just employ Ryan directly? We want to keep him after this,
Hmm.
and they were told no.
Hmm.
And I don't
Yeah.
see why having everyone only have 2 years of experience benefits anyone. I feel like if they just got rid of that clause and they could keep teachers, everything would improve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can see that there's definitely a way, like a benefit to maybe doing like a hybrid system. I can get like both sides of the argument. It certainly would be great to have, like the constant people there that are actually moving up in their career and like motivated to actually,
Hmm.
keep trying and improving rather than like, I'm only going to be here 1 year, 2 years. So it's like, I don't have to try that hard.
The only thing I can think of is that they want to expose the students to a variety of people and having them
Yeah.
switch like every 2 years. You might have like an Australian and an American and a Canadian. But in
Mm-hmm.
reality, that doesn't work. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know who picks who goes where, but the entire 6 years I've been here, 100% of ALTs in my city have been American.
Really? That's interesting.
We like again, we don't know who's picking it, but we all strongly suspect whoever is in that office just likes Americans and therefore always picks Americans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the city north of us, like there are Americans, but they have a large number of British people. So I think
Mm-hmm.
whoever works there just likes British people and picks the British people. Uh, I'm
Okay.
prefectural, but we also have my city ALTs. It's weird. They do like the junior highs and the elementary schools. They have been 100% female and
Hmm.
American.
Wow. Okay. That's super
So,
specific.
like, yeah, I don't think it actually is randomized. I don't think they are getting a wide variety of people in most places. I think whoever's in selection just keeps picking what they're familiar with. So if
Mm-hmm.
that is their goal, it's really not working out. So let us stay longer if
Mm-hmm.
we want to. Most people don't want
Yeah.
to stay longer. Like most people don't view it as a full-time job, like
Yeah.
full-time career, I guess I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they would end up just losing all variety immediately. It's just a handful of people who actually like teaching and are motivated would stay, and then the others wouldn't and still get it.
Yeah, I agree. I would see there'd be that two types of people. Yeah. Um. So for you personally, are you kind of leaning on the side of Jet then?
Yeah, like I said, the contract is just better.
Yeah, it's more secure, safer.
I
At least you know what you're getting.
My era of Eikaiwa, I think, was fine. I've heard it has gotten worse. I haven't experienced it personally, so I can't
Mhm.
really say. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
the worst contract I had was the private version of Jet. Again, the teaching was fun because it was the same thing as Jet. But
Hmm.
right now, when it's summer vacation, we still have to go to the school. We get some days off, but you can take a whole month off actually if you want to burn all your days off. You do get days off that
Hmm.
you can use freely. I choose to
Hmm.
save them. So I go to the school and I just kind of have free time, talk with the teachers, browse the internet, but I'm paid.
Hmm.
My private ALT job during summer vacation and spring vacation, we just had a month off with no pay.
No. Okay.
Which at first sounds like cool, you could do vacations until you realize the whole no pay thing for a full month
Sure.
means that I pretty much sat at home just like watching YouTube, saving my money,
Hmm.
being as stingy
Yeah.
as possible. And all of my friends still had work, so I couldn't even like hang out with them. It was just like really boring.
Yeah. 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 I mean, so basically, I agree with basically all the problems that you brought up with, Jet and English education and stuff in Japan. But overall, like I'm very happy that I did Jet. I think it
Yeah, as
was,
an experience, it's great.
yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I got to meet so many people that grew as a person. It was great, and I regret nothing. But like any, I mean, you could say this about any job. It does have its frustrating parts, and that is what it is. Sometimes some jobs are better, sometimes they're worse. And in Jet, you can really sometimes you end up in a really bad situation, and sometimes you end up in a really good situation. So it's really tough to say, like, across the board. But I mean, in terms of security, yeah, like Jet, yes, but I mean, that's not to say I think there are probably still some opportunities within Eikaiwa. You might be able to find something really good. So there are also like private schools, right? Like
Yeah.
private Eikaiwa, kind of like small local schools. You might be able to find something pretty like reliable and secure there. Like if that's what you're looking for in Japan, there are still opportunities out there, but you sometimes you gotta do something for 1 year while you look for something else while
Yeah.
you're already there, right? Just to get the visa.
I do think the Eikaiwas, if you want to be here long term, most people don't want to do them long term, but I do think they have more of a future because they don't have like a year limit usually. And if you're
Yeah.
there for many years, you can eventually become like the area leader or the manager or some guy working at the headquarters instead of the teaching stuff. Because they always have some kind of foreign native speaker coordinator guy who's usually been in Japan for like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. And then of course I hear, I've heard of people like on podcasts and stuff that talk about, maybe they get started on Jet or Eikaiwa and then eventually they start their own school, right? They do their own thing. So that is probably one of the best situations, but you just have to be okay with running your own business and doing your own, running it on your own terms and doing all that. So,
I had a friend who did that.
Yeah, I mean,
started at GEOS, I think, and then opened his own school.
Yeah. I mean, that can be, really fun and interesting and you get to meet tons of people, but, you do have to deal with the business aspect of it. So that can be a little
if you
tough.
take that approach, you get some students for free because they tend to take the students from their old schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be leaving next week to open my own class for my own school. Like, here's my phone number if you're interested.
Yeah. Don't tell the manager here, but I'm already leaving, so it kind of doesn't matter anyway.
Honestly, even if they don't do that, like a lot of the customers at Eikaiwa use the teacher changing as an excuse to like cancel their contracts.
Right. Yeah. Huh. All right. So, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, teaching English in Japan, nothing wrong with it, but like any job, it can come with its frustrating parts. But overall, I like I said, I don't regret my experience there, and it can be really, really fun and interesting. And it is one of the best ways to get your foot in the door in Japan. And then if you do want to try other stuff, then, now you're there and you can, start looking and applying for other stuff. And hopefully you don't cancel your contract early. That's always, unfortunate when that happens. But if you can, do your contract and then move on to something else, I mean, that's what a lot of people I think end up doing.
I do think that is the most important thing is you need a visa to come to Japan. I think some people, especially when they're in college and don't know about the world so much, they think like, I'll just move to Japan and find something. But you can't actually do that. Even if you go there on like a travel visa, you can't legally work. So you almost have to do one of the two programs just to get into Japan before you can start looking for other stuff. I've heard of lots of people who come here doing Jet or Eikaiwa for 1 year and then quit and end up working as like some tech designer guy for some company in Tokyo, completely unrelated to teaching, but they just needed to get into Japan with a visa and then start looking for stuff afterwards.
Yeah. I would highly recommend like for you to have some other like skill or knowledge base expertise, because once you're in Japan and you have some Japanese ability, plus you have the visa and you have this other area of expertise, now you become like much more employable. And it's easier to get out of that English thing. But if that's what you're looking to do, right? If you're happy teaching, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I mean is like, there's people that want to do other things, but they have to first get in English, right? But if you don't have that other expertise, then it's hard to get out of that English bubble, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, even like, for people that have the background in teaching and all that, then you can move on to like university teaching or perhaps, other opportunities. But, like I said, that does tend to be the easiest way in a sense, unless you happen to get married to somebody, a Japanese citizen, then that is another popular other option. But, that doesn't always happen for everyone. You just got to get into Japan first.
I will say I've heard two things from a lot of people before they come to Japan. One, they think they're going to learn Japanese like automatically, which you will not. Like if your plan is to like live here and
you'll
do
learn
something like
some,
that, you'll pick up like very basic words and phrases, but not enough to actually work. So if that is your goal, I highly recommend get a teacher, start studying. Two, I've heard it's really easy to get a girlfriend and get married in Japan, which I also think is not true.
Yeah, not. I mean, I think that more depends on the person that's looking for the partner.
Yeah. Don't expect
Yeah,
just like a swarm of girls to run up to you and want to marry you the
yeah,
second you get off the plane.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So but anyway, yeah. So that's our take. I hope we didn't get too silly today, but hopefully that's useful to somebody out there that happens to do a Google search and comes across this. So, all right. But if you have any questions, anything you want us to discuss, you can send an email over to ichimon@japankyo.com. You can join the Patreon over at japankyo.com/Patreon. Thank you so much. We've gotten a few questions that we haven't gotten to answer because it takes us like 4 months to get to any single question because we're only doing one episode a month, but we keep them in mind. We see your emails, guys, so we see them. Don't worry.
And
We
then
will
there's the delay
address.
time for when they actually get posted too.
Yeah.
So it takes
No,
us 4 months to
exactly.
get to the question and 4 months to post it.
Yeah. It takes a while. Sorry, because that's a monthly schedule, but we do see everything you guys said. So
Just so you guys know, it is currently June 1st, 2019.
Now I'm gonna move this up to July now. Now you made me want to. Oh wait, no, it isn't June 1st. Wait, what did you say?
I said
No,
June
it's
1st,
August
2019.
2022. No, it's August 2022. I wasn't even listening. All right, anyway, no, I'll get this out soon-ish. I don't want this to sound so old now.
When did
Because
we
now you
start? Were we
dated it.
doing this in 2019?
Maybe.
Okay, yeah, I think that's when we started because you definitely
I think
came
we
to visit
started
before
2019.
Corona.
Yeah. I think we started in 2019. Exactly. Yeah. I think we started like releasing in January of 2019.
It's our first episode, guys. We released it late.
Yeah. We actually recorded this the first one.
We recorded it late, but we're still calling it the first episode. Don't worry about how that works.
All right. Thanks, Ryan, for all that info. I didn't know all that crazy stuff you went through in Eikaiwa, so that was fun learning about that.
Oh yeah, I guess that's my most important advice. If your company closes or whatever, just show up for work anyway. Probably something will work
showing
out.
up. Like,
honestly,
hey,
yeah, it's helping. Like being proactive will.
Yeah.
At least your odds will be better than the people who stay home and hope that someone else will keep their job for them.
That is so true. Yeah, it's like, well, okay, I guess they're home, so they probably don't care that much. But Ryan's still here. Okay, maybe. I guess he's still employed. I guess that means he's still here. So
I got like an extra. How long was it? It wasn't quite a year, I don't think. Like an extra 6 to 7 months of work just because I showed up.
Like, guys. Well, there's that sports thing, right? Like 50% of winning is like showing up.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? Yeah, you just got to show up. You can't win unless you show up. So there you go, guys.
They don't want to fire you, so just be there. Well, I mean, some weird dude in an office somewhere probably paid millions wants to, but you'll never meet him anyway.
Yeah, exactly. The person that picks who gets fired is probably not even working at that office. So, yeah.
That's another fun thing about Jet is like whenever someone asks you who is your boss, nobody knows.
Yeah, that's true. It's like you have somebody that's kind of like overseeing you at the school, but not really your boss. So
that is actually, before we end, that is one of the best things I think about being in education. So we're just talking about the difference. In Eikaiwa, you have a clear boss who's whoever your like regional manager dude is. In Jet, you really don't. It's just ambiguously the government of Japan. And I think psychologically, not having a boss who can fire you makes you just feel much more relaxed and happy at work.
Yeah. I mean, you have to do something pretty darn bad to get fired from Jet. Like, it's usually pretty severe. Most of the time, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, like, the principal's your boss, but not really. They're, like, the head of the school, but they don't have the authority to fire you. They'd have to, like, request to let you go from the school board or whatever.
Yeah, like, you get, like dispatched to that school in a way.
Yeah.
They're like, I guess you're superior, but not in a weird way, not also. So
they have authority over you, but they're not really your boss. And for the first 3 years I was here, everyone said that like, oh, our boss is the dude, this one specific dude who worked like in the JET program in the Board of Education. But when I renewed for my 4th year, you have to go in for like a bonus interview, and that person directly interviewed me, and he was like, oh, I'm not your boss. So I am now under the assumption that my boss is ambiguously the government of Ishikawa.
It's like you walk into an office and you ask everybody in the office, like, who's your boss? And everybody points to like everybody else.
Yeah, because he was like, yeah, I'm in charge of this program and I'm in charge of these duties, but I'm not really your boss. Like, I don't think of myself like that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh man, there's no boss.
He was really friendly too.
Yeah, no, the guy that was in charge, I guess at this point I don't even know, but he was kind of in charge of the ALTs in COVID. He was super nice. I really liked him. But again, I don't know if he was technically our quote unquote boss or like who the boss was.
I don't know how I've never heard of ALTs being fired. I mean, okay, it's a private thing.
I think I've heard like once or twice, but it's like super rare.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people like showing up to work drunk and like yelling at students and stuff. But yeah. I guess if they want to fire you, there's probably some kind of board meeting at the Board of Education, not just one dude.
I'm sure there's a
like,
form.
Yeah.
They got to fill it out or something. And
it has to be honkoed 17 times.
Yeah. And then it has to be reviewed by, another 10 people or something. And then they have to consider whether it's worth having a meeting over. And then once they've, concluded that it is worth having a meeting, then they have the meeting. And then, yeah.
Well, then they have a meeting to schedule like the other meeting.
Yeah. To schedule when they will actually have the actual meeting where things will be discussed.
We're joking about this, but this is actually pretty accurate. So
yeah, it kind of is. Yeah.
Whenever we have a school event, every time, like I have to travel to other schools to be like a judge for like speech contests and debates and whatever. The way we do this is someone who's involved with that will contact me personally. I think usually they'll just like send an email to the school that will get forwarded to you normally, but I've been here long enough that I'm kind of like, I know the people who organize these things. So they just like email me directly and they'll say like, hey, we have this speech contest coming up. Do you think you'd be able to go talk with your people, see if it's okay? After getting the okay, they say, okay, now I'll send over the invitation. Yeah, for whatever reason, they won't send the formal invitation until you've already informally accepted the invitation.
It's like a marriage, like a omiai marriage thing, arranged marriage.
I guess I don't know. It seems silly and redundant. I guess on paperwork, it's because the formal one goes to like the principal or the vice principal, who they're not that in tune with what we are doing, like on a personal level. So they're just like, oh, I guess there's a speech contest. Yeah, whatever. So they want to like make sure the teacher's actually okay with it before contacting the school officially.
Yeah.
It does get kind of silly. We're like. Sometimes there's even an extra step because sometimes if like one of those, we get invited to another high school to do something. And so the high school's ALT will contact me directly. Is this okay? Then their supervisor will contact my supervisor unofficially to make sure it's okay. Then they'll finally send over the official invitation.
It's like, there's got to be a better way. But yeah, you hear about this. Yeah. It's a pretty common joke. Like even like, politics or whatever. It's like they're considering whether they should consider to do this thing. It's like, so just do it. It's like freaking hell, just do it.
I have to do a weekly report that I just like write down on like how many hours of teaching I did and what classes I taught and whatever. And there's like a comment section and I have to write something. So I would just say like the ESS students are working really hard. But I told my previous advisor, like my last month when I quit, I'm literally going to write like, does anyone actually read this? If so, please contact me. And I'm going to put my email address. And you'd expect like Japanese people to be like, oh, you can't do that. But she's like, yeah, you should do that. Tell me if they actually contact you. I'm curious too.
I love that.
I'm pretty sure
Japanese people do have a sense of humor, people.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure these literally just go in some book in some drawer and then they're never touched again forever.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of these people, I know for a fact, they are frustrated with a lot of this bureaucratic crap as well, but they just got to deal with it just like everybody else. So it is what it is. Yeah. All right. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. So hopefully that was interesting, informational to some of you guys. So yeah, Jet, Eikaiwa, figure out what works best for you, but nothing's perfect, but hopefully you find the perfect situation for you.
To give a little plus to Jet or to Eikaiwa, I did like the hours. I liked waking up later and staying up later.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, that's good. I mean, I do prefer waking up later. So
having the Monday off too is actually pretty good too because
for banks and stuff like that.
So the last thing I'll say, banks have obnoxiously short hours in Japan where they're only open weekdays, and sometimes they're even closed one of the weekdays, and then they close at like 3:30.
Yeah.
So unless you like take a day off work, you basically just can't go to a bank. But having the
Yep.
Monday off, like you can just do whatever business you need to do, and it's easy.
Yep. Yeah. No, that is super convenient. Yeah. All right. So there you go, guys. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.